course, crime. Safety is important. And we have to establish irreproachable public safety services, not just in terms of the policies, practices, procedures, equipment, training, deployment, response time, and overall performance, but also in terms of making certain the entire police and fire department, rank, file, and command is proportionately reflective of the city's population, Black, white, Latino, and Asian. We have to establish a relationship between the people in the communities and the police officers.
Let's talk about crime. Crime and the number of police officers on the street recently have been big issues. What do you do? What's your strategy to tackle those issues?
The first thing we do is declare a state of emergency, and the state of emergency means that you stop police officers from writing parking tickets, stop them from languishing in court to prosecute a broken tail light. We stop them from making a lot of domestic abuse arrests that require a whole lot of time when, in fact, a little counseling by the police officers can resolve the situation.
Declare a state of emergency in the city of Chicago. You think we're at that point already?
We are, but that doesn't mean bring any outside sources in. It means take those police officers who are on desk duty and give them assignments on the beats and on the streets, because where there's presence, there's deterrence.
All right, so after you declare a state of emergency, what's the outcome? What happens next?
Well, what happens next is you then have a relationship between the people and the police officers, because those police officers find themselves around our parks, our schools, our libraries, our economic centers, and they're getting to know the residents, and they're not so quick to pull the trigger. They grow to know people, and that's important.
You want to reopen CPS schools.
Absolutely.
That were closed.
Absolutely.
How do you go about
doing that? You should have
never
closed those schools, even if you thought they were certifiably underperforming, even if you thought that the enrollment was dismally low, because communities are built around park schools and libraries. You have to keep those schools open. So what do? You take a portion of those schools and you maintain them for education facilities. But then another portion of the building, you put in a Chicago Police substation. You put in a Department of Human Services. You put in a WIC office. You put in a regional CPS office. You put in counseling in therapy for those students who are mandated to have that. Now you have a multi-use facility that's fully sustainable, and it's ready as the community bounces back. As those vacant lots start to turn back into houses and buildings, and children need a community school to go to, you now have a school in the area for those children. People determine where they're going to move to based upon whether or not they're park schools and libraries. So you can't decimate those things and expect that you're going to have viable communities.
And I think, Doc, that some critics would say that sounds like a really great idea. The question is, how do you pay for that?
It's self-sustainable. The police department pays for its part. The Department of Human Services pays for its part. The WIC department pays for its part. CPS regional office pays for its part. And the doctors who run the therapy pay for their part. So it becomes a sustainable building. It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything more than what it's costing now to keep the lights and the electricity and the gas on in those schools.
All right, Doc, candidate for mayor, we're going to take a quick break. We'll have more of our discussion with you when we come back right after this. News Views, our guest this morning, William Doc Walz, candidate for Chicago mayor. Doc, we were just talking about education and schools. You've proposed teaching the Bible in schools. Why?
Absolutely. We teach Greek mythology, we teach Egyptian hieroglyphics, and those are principles of religion from different nations, different countries. The Bible is the premise of Western civilization. In fact, our dollar says, "In God we trust." So it's important for our children to understand why. You can't preach it, but the Constitution says you can teach it, and it's taught in school districts all around the country.
There are some that would argue the focus should be more on math and science so that students can keep up and compete with other students across the globe.
Without equivocation, you have to teach reading, writing, math, and science. You have to teach civics. You have to teach humanities. You have to teach the arts. You have to teach vocations. You have to teach children to follow their hearts, their minds, their dreams, and their talents. You have to teach them music and band and teach them to get outside and play with other children. So you certainly have to do that, but they're not mutually exclusive. So teaching the Bible in the schools, not preaching the Bible in the schools as part of the curriculum is something that I think would be beneficial to everybody.
You've proposed cutting City Hall in half, going from 50 aldermen to 25. How would you go about doing that?
Well, now that we have 311 and modern technology, most of the functions that the aldermen used to perform are performed by the city itself. And most of the aldermen are just a rubber stamp for the mayor. I mean, we have a weak mayor strong council form of government where the mayor proposes and the council disposes, but that's not what's taking place. The money matters. So when you have slush funds like the TIF fund that the mayor completely controls and other such funds, aldermen become insignificant.
But still, do you think that residents and neighborhoods have some type of adequate representation?
Not in most instances. I think that they would be equally as adequately represented with 25 aldermen as opposed to 50.
Why do this?
It saves money, it saves time, it saves confusion, and it gives people more effective government that they can count on.
There was an event recently that was sponsored by a group that wanted to get rid of those red light cameras. You were one of the people that went to that event. Is that what you want to do?
Absolutely. I've always maintained that the red light cameras are more of a hazard than they are a help. Yellow has become the new red. People see the yellow light and they slam on their brakes, and the car behind them rear ends, and the Tribune's numbers confirm that. And then you have a guy like Jesus Garcia, who's a candidate for mayor, who says one thing at that meeting, I'll ban the red light cameras, and then he goes over on the other side of town and says, I'm not going to do it.
What do we do about unfunded pensions in this city?
Well, the first thing you have to do is make certain that you keep your commitment and your promise to the long-serving employees of the city of Chicago. The next thing you have to do is figure out a two-tier method that doesn't dilute the current pension program, but also provides the opportunity for people to have the equivalent of a 401k program. The other thing that's really important and critical is to reduce the management cost of those pensions and get rid of the automatic 3% raise every year.